so thank you for joining me today for this coffee chat. So really, I mean for this series to be just an informal way for students to kind of get to know you as more of an individual.
Okay.
I know a lot of times when students can come into a class, and we've been students ourselves, right, that you see a professor and you have the confidence to talk in front of all these students and be an expert in the subject that you're teaching. And I know for a lot of students that I've met that can be intimidating. And so I kind of just want them to get to see like who you are as a person, how you came to be doing what you're doing, and, you know, even thinking about what you'd recommend for them to do to be successful interacting with you.
Okay.
So the first question I always like to ask is, what got you into chemistry? What got you into teaching chemistry?
Okay. What got me into chemistry was a absolutely fantastic ninth grade teacher in high school. She was the one who introduced me to what chemistry was and hooked me on it. And I was one of those few people that I've never changed majors. I've never deviated from it. I have always gone chemistry, and I've gone different versions of chemistry. But it has always been chemistry, and it was solely due to that ninth grade teacher. She was outstanding.
That's fantastic. I know so many people's journeys. Some are like yours, where they're, you know, it's been the same thing, and others it's a little bit of A and then B and then C and then D. Now, within that journey, did you always see yourself teaching chemistry, or do you see yourself being in the lab? How did that happen?
I actually never thought. Well, I always thought my retirement plan was teaching.
Okay.
I believe to be a good educator, we need to have some perspective of what the students are going to do when they leave.
Yeah.
So my goal has always been to gain that type of perspective and bring it back to the classroom and back to my experiences. So with that in mind, no, I did not go straight into academics. In fact, I took 5 years off between sophomore and junior year trying to figure out what I did want to do. And then when I started back, I did my associates, my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, and then I went to work for the Navy.
Oh, wow.
For 5 years as a research chemist. And it was working for the Navy that got me a lot of interesting perspectives and gave me some of the confidence I needed to move to come to academics. And just so happened the position here at VCU opened up at just the right time, and stars aligned, and here's where I am and have been for going on 16 years now.
That's great. I know I myself was a military research contractor for a little bit and had a lot of friends in the Navy doing research. So I could definitely relate to the unique perspective that you get doing that kind of research. And I know so many students don't even realize that you have those kinds of opportunities when you join a field like chemistry, that you don't have to just be a chemistry professor or in a lab being a chemist. Like, you can be working for the military, working for other organizations.
There's a expression that's commonly used as chemistry is a central science, and it overlaps with so many different aspects. My research, for example, is synthesis of magnetic materials, novel magnetic materials.
Okay.
For the Navy, that was for power transformers and for radar. My first few years here at VCU is for biomedical applications. The last few years, it has been for electric motors and magnetic refrigeration. But all along that path, I have also done research in animal feeds and slow time release fertilizers for agricultural. I've also worked with the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts to do art restoration projects. So, chemistry is a skill set. It's a toolbox, and you can use that toolbox in a huge array of different areas, rather than the traditional what an undergraduate's exposed to.
So then, kind of going off of that, how do you recommend that students explore their interest in chemistry, or what do you recommend that someone does when they're not sure where chemistry relates to their interests, their long-term objectives, if they even have them? What can they do to kind of explore that as an interest?
Okay. What I tend to advise undergrads is here at VCU, there are tremendous opportunities,
Yeah.
wide arrays of research. Go get involved in it. Go to the professors and ask and see. Read what they do, see if that's what interests you, and work with them if it means that at the halfway through, 3/4 of the way through the first semester, you realize, no, that's not for me. Finish the semester and then try a different one. Move to someone else. Do a different perspective. It's those different perspectives that give you that toolbox and give you that expertise to move forward. It also gives you the confidence to know that you can do all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but because we're an R1 institution, there is quite a bit of extreme high caliber research going on in all kinds of areas.
Yeah.
Look and talk to the professors. And more importantly, I think, is don't wait until junior and senior year. Start in sophomore, start having those discussions. Just talk to the professors and talk about it. See if you can talk about research. Most of us absolutely love talking about our research.
Yeah.
And start figuring out a plan. And then from there, once you have an idea, there are national opportunities to go elsewhere. The National Science Foundation funds a research experience for undergraduates at a wide variety of different institutions for the summer. Go forth. Again, learn another perspective, get an idea.
Yeah.
And this whole time, keep your eyes open and look around. See what the graduate students are doing, see what the postdocs are doing. You know, as I tell my the undergrads I advise, you know, you need to look around and go, I really like what they're doing, but not what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then you can start charting your path to what you like. And that path may not always be graduate school. Quite often it is not or should not be because research is never ending.
Yes.
That's why it's called research and not just search. It is sometimes it is almost a treadmill, and some people that doesn't agree with them. So, but saying that, working as a researcher in an undergraduate or in a graduate lab, or that gives you experience to identify what parts of chemistry you like.
Sure, sure.
You know, you can go to work for a biomedical researcher and decide, no, I really don't like playing with cell assays. Then you know good and well that you don't want to go work for a biochemical company. You know, you want to look for a different one. So it gives you opportunities. And you may decide that that's the best thing since sliced bread, and that's your future. Fantastic. Go forth.
So going back to what you mentioned with, you know, that initial getting involved in these co-curricular experiences like research, you know, what does a student, at least in your perspective, what do they need to have accomplished for you or for, you know, other faculty in your department to say, like, you're ready to do research? Is there certain classes you'd like them to complete first, or certain experiences or communication you'd like to have with them where you feel comfortable with them coming to a lab?
Most of my colleagues, they prefer to have students after quantitative analysis.
Okay, so 309, right?
309, because that's a very hands-on laboratory.
Okay.
And it teaches a lot of laboratory skills. So they would like you to have organic and quant.
Okay.
Going in. Some of us, I have taken sophomores who just came out of freshman.
Sure.
It just depends. The level of involvement in the lab and in the research projects entirely depends on maturity, independence, and skill level.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why most do it late at junior, senior year.
Okay.
But I don't think you always have to do that. I think that you start those conversations earlier rather than later.
Sure.
And if, for example, organic is one of the things you like, well, let's face it, that's sophomore year.
Yeah.
So why not start at the end of organic going forth and trying it? And it never hurts at all to ask, to go talk to someone, to start those conversations. And you can start those conversations in the lab with your TAs.
Okay.
I know in a lot of cases for me, the TAs identify potential undergrads because they see the lab skills, they see the maturity level, the personality, and start having those conversations with the TAs and see.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't had another professor mention like it's okay for you to even start with a fellow student because that student will talk to me if that's where you're comfortable at. For the students who do feel comfortable to talk to you, is there something in particular you'd like them to talk about? Like, do you want them to look at articles that you've published recently beforehand? Is it okay for them to just say like, I'm just interested and don't even know where to start this conversation?
That's fine with me. It's just starting with, I really like chemistry, and I do like for them to at least have some idea of what I do. And you can get that from the website. It's a little dated, but the information is there and you can start that conversation.
Yeah.
And then I usually don't have them start doing reading and such until we're starting to commit to working in my lab.
Okay.
Because the articles are all available, you can absolutely go pull them and you can see. I don't expect you to. I expect let's start having a conversation first.
Sure.
And that may be simply, like I said, you go, you read, you see what I like, and you come and talk to me and tell me, I don't know quite where to start, but I really liked some of the things you did or are doing.
Sure.
Can we talk about your research? And let's move from there.
So getting into a little bit of a different topic, going back more to the teaching and academic side, what do you see from, what attributes do you see or resources do you see your students use where they're more likely to be successful in your classes? Is there certain resources that they're using typically, or a certain way that they're studying that you believe to be a more successful way to do that?
I believe that chemistry, like many of the hard sciences, it's abstract.
Yeah.
And that makes it very difficult for you to just memorize an answer like you could for some other sciences like biology or such. You cannot do that.
Sure.
So instead, what I tend to suggest is look for patterns. Chemistry follows patterns. I mean, we have the periodic table of elements based on patterns. So look for those. And then you can start extrapolating from there. The big thing is working through examples, working through problems.
Sure.
And I know you've heard this, they've heard this. Talk to the TAs, talk to the professor. If you are stuck, do not bang your head against the wall, get frustrated because you will never learn that way.
Yeah.
Go talk to someone. And if you're intimidated to me, then there's the TAs. If you can't get to the TAs, there's SI leaders. There is someone that you can corner.
Yeah.
The successful students I've had through freshmen were the ones who were engaged.
Okay.
They were the ones who asked the questions. They were the ones who I don't understand this. Can you explain it a different way? And I think that's critical.
But then going off of that, and this is where I know I struggled a lot personally, what's the level of question where a student should feel comfortable going to? Because I know a lot of times they're in these larger classes and they're always thinking like, is my question important enough to bother this person's time, this professor's time? Is there a level that you'd like them to meet?
No, because I think that if a level is drawn like that, then they will always be the second guessing of maybe I shouldn't go ask him. And I would much rather you come to me with the simplest of questions, spend 30 seconds with me and go, oh yeah, okay, and then leave, rather than sit at home wondering, get distracted and go do something else entirely.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think there's a real threshold. Matter of fact, part of the reason I also don't think there's that threshold is because it starts the conversation.
Yeah.
So you ask this very basic question, and now you can ask the more complicated one that didn't know how to phrase in the first place. So no, if you have a question, corner me, the TAs, etc. Ask it, even if it is the simple question. And a lot of times, the TAs are distracted, they're busy, they're trying to do their own thing.
Yeah.
If you're not getting the answer or the help you need from them, come back to me. I'm perfectly fine with that. Because ultimately, me and my colleagues, we all want them to succeed. We want the students to succeed. That's why we are here to teach so that you can succeed. That's why we came to a university. I was a research chemist for the Navy. I was perfectly content doing research for them. I came here because I wanted to teach and I wanted to interact with the students. So it doesn't bother me at all for them to come to me and ask, what they may perceive as a silly question, because the high likelihood I don't think it's a silly question. So
that's good. That's great to hear. So, one of the things too that I've noticed in my other positions here at VCU and that students sometimes struggle with is, they get a slower start in a class. They fall behind and they're trying to catch up. For your classes or for your intro class, what do you recommend a student maybe didn't realize how difficult your class was going to be, and now they're trying to think, okay, do I want to withdraw? Can I catch up? What do you recommend in terms of how they can catch up maybe after that first test doesn't go the way they plan, or they have a C or a D and they're like, what's possible? What can I do?
Sure. The quickest thing there is recognizing it quickly. Now, you need to realize that you are overwhelmed sooner than later. If you are spending half the semester banging your head and you're getting behind on the first, the second, the third test, then coming to me is a little late because it's hard to undo that.
Yep.
But if after that first test, you're just not following it, then you need to, let's figure out why. Come and talk to me. Let's figure it out. More times than not, I see that it's test taking. It's not necessarily material, it's test taking.
Actual skill itself.
Right. Because you fail to really understand what the question is asking you. Because chemistry follows patterns, you need to march through the problem. And if you understand clearly what it's asking you, then you can backtrack that march.
Okay.
But if you can't, then you get stuck, and then it goes downhill from there.
Sure.
The big thing is absolutely do not wait until November to go, I'm behind. Is there any hope of coming back?
Yeah.
There's a lot of water under that bridge, and it's really hard to come back from that. And the other part is just remembering we're there to help. So come get the help.
So going along that lines, a lot of our students have other obligations in life, right? They're working part or full time, whether that's research or other employment. They have family issues, they're dealing with personal health issues.
Absolutely.
What does your flexibility look like in your classroom with those issues popping up that affect tests or homework? Is there a certain way you want students to communicate with you to get that flexibility? How does that work for you in your classroom?
I absolutely respect the fact that life happens. It absolutely happens. Sometimes in dramatic fashion. But I think that if the student is committed to the education and committed to being here as part of that life happening, then I'm willing to work with them to make accommodations. If that means moving a test deadline from Thursday to Friday, or I'm okay with that.
Sure.
As long as it's not a habit.
Okay.
Because things crop up. Sure.
Yeah.
One of the classes I used to teach, the students commonly were taking another course simultaneously, and it turns out both of us always had the test on the exact same day.
Of course.
And I had students several times who said, I just can't, this week has been miserable at work. I can't do both. Can I move? And I'm like, sure. I mean, it's no big deal.
And do you want them to communicate with you in a certain way? Do you prefer in person, over email? Like, is there a certain amount of time you want them to give you?
Yes, I need to know as quick as they can let me know. I tend not to react really well to where if the deadline is at 5 o'clock and you email me at 3 o'clock, I tend not to like that.
Sure.
But usually something's happening the day before.
Okay.
Or such, and that's perfectly fine. Let me know then. I prefer. It's oftentimes easier to get in touch with me by email because I'm busy back and forth. And that's I answer email all the time. My graduate students have made fun of me in the past because I'll respond to emails at 3 in the morning because I'm a morning person. So
that's great to know because I know that it's always hard to know exactly when's the appropriate time to contact. I know I've dealt with students where the contact is like minutes before or minutes after something. I'm like, if I'd known a day before, that would be such a better way for us to have this conversation.
Right, and some of the lessons that I've learned the past year and a half with using technology is that sometimes is playing the slot machine. Yeah. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you get that email 10 minutes after the deadline. I don't think it's submitted. Okay, drop me that email. Let me know. Let me know as soon as you know. And I'll work with you accordingly. Like I said, the big thing is I don't like it being habits.
Sure.
Because if it's a habit, then I question, are you really committed to learning the material?
Yeah.
But if it's one-offs, it's one-offs. Absolutely. I'll be more than happy to try to accommodate.
So going back to the communication piece in terms of your students where they are looking for more than just getting an A in your class, they're looking for research, they're looking for letters of recommendation. I know a lot of our pre-health students, a lot of our students who are interested in going to grad school are always thinking about how do I form my relationship with my professor to a point where they would feel comfortable either helping me get an opportunity or being a letter of recommendation for me. What does that look like to you to feel comfortable giving a student a letter of recommendation, or maybe it's even to tell a student like, hey, I think that you would be great in my lab, even though you haven't directly asked me. I feel comfortable with that.
The big thing is starting that relationship is asking, and part of that relationship is in the classroom.
Okay.
Asking and engaging.
Okay.
I teach freshmen, which is 120 students.
Yeah.
If you do not engage with me, then it is very difficult for me to know who you are.
Yeah.
But if you engage with me, that's a different story. I will remember that. And if we can come back to that. Also, part of it is many of us, while we may not be formal advisors, are more than happy to do advising.
Sure.
And the students have questions, come by, let's talk. It doesn't have to be necessarily about my class. It could be about, how do I get into this, or how do I get into that?
Yeah.
I may put you off a couple of days until I have time, but let's sit down. Let's talk through those. I'm perfectly content to do that. And I think that's how you start building that rapport to get those recommendations, meaningful recommendations, and to help figure out and chart your path forward. Is start engaging in the classroom so I remember your name, and then follow up with questions and issues. And that way, when you are 2 years down the road and you're starting to look for letters of recommendation, I remember who you are.
Yeah.
And then I can feel more comfortable writing one and helping direct you.
It's so great that you said one of the things I've had just happen throughout my conversations with VCU faculty in this series has been that you all are just like, come in and see me, even if it's not about the classroom. Like, I'm happy to just get to know you. Like,
Sure.
if that's all that you need from me, like, that's perfect. And that's still enough for us to establish a relationship, for me to feel comfortable being a letter of recommendation of research, is just making the effort to have that communication with me. That to me has just been like such a fantastic thing to just see throughout the conversations I've had.
Yeah, I like to engage with the students. They're the reason I'm here, and so any way that I can engage, I'm happy to do that. And if it's something I feel uncomfortable with, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I'll point you in a direction of somewhere that is more comfortable, or I think would be more suited for that kind of conversation. I'm fine with that. But at least reach out. I mean, I spend probably 60% of my office hours with no one sitting in my office.
It's very lonely.
It gets very lonely. So, if you are having questions about your career or your path forward, or your working through your curriculum, stop through. Perfectly fine.
Awesome. So the last question I like to ask all my faculty in this series has been, how would you like your students to perceive you?
Oh, that's an interesting one. How would I like them to perceive me? I tend to, even in my research group, I do not see myself as just the principal investigator, or that's one of my postdocs kept calling me boss. I don't like that. I like it as a team.
Okay.
I am more of a team leader.
Mhm.
We are in this journey together through the course and potentially after the course. Therefore, I am a resource, and that's how I tend to like to see myself.
Yeah.
Education is not a solitary event. You are not alone doing it. And as a result, you should use every resource at your disposal. And you certainly are one of those resources.
So, well, thank you so much for joining me for the Science of Coffee Chat today.
Absolutely.